Welcome to Codex, History of Video Games. I'm Mike Coletta.
And I'm Tyler Osby.
And today, it's a discussion episode day. And this is kind of selfish by me a little bit.
Okay.
Because you got me into this. You do it as well. And I was like, I just want an excuse to talk to my friend Tyler about console modding for an hour. And that's what we're doing today. And I don't care who knows it. So
I'm happy to talk about console modding for any amount of time.
Yeah, for 30 minutes to 1 hour. That's what we usually shoot for on this podcast. So I guess we should tell the people what we did, right? What I did for the questions. I can tell the people. So I have not used AI much, but I was like, I need some discussion questions. And I feel like this is the most harmless thing you can do, because what's ChatGPT is doing is pulling it from the internet, right? So I asked ChatGPT to write us some discussion questions. We took the list. We edited it because some of the questions did not make sense or were not good or just didn't apply to us. And then what we got left with is our discussion chat for today. So we have a little bit of a schedule, as they say.
Gets us started on talking. And if we ask one question and then never look at the questions again, then that's fine.
Yeah. So we're trying that out today. And I'm kind of excited to talk about it. So I guess we should start with what prompted this. And that is that you helped me mod an Xbox over the internet. We did it remotely, but you modded one as well.
Yeah, we did it. We did it together. I've been modding Xboxes or familiar with the scene of Xbox modding since like 2006, probably.
Ooh, wow.
So when it was like actually a big deal.
That's awesome, though. When did you mod your first one? Do you know?
In 2006, I think I modded my first Xbox because I had bought one from a friend who had upgraded to the Xbox 360. So I bought his old regular Xbox and I did a soft mod on it. And mostly because I wanted to do homebrew stuff on it, specifically emulators, because at the time, hooking a computer up to a TV was like just mind-blowing stuff. Like HDMI existed. A lot of computers didn't have HDMI ports. A lot of people didn't have TVs with HDMI. And it was like, so being able to put whatever you wanted onto your TV was like kind of a novelty back then. And so you could run whatever you wanted on an Xbox, and you could put it on your TV and you could play your old emulated games on your TV. Whoa, that's crazy. Nowadays, obviously that's people do that all the time. But back then it was actually really cool. And you could use it to play your media files if you had like TV shows you had downloaded or something like that, rather than having to like burn them to a DVD, which would have been kind of the only other option would be to like author a DVD of your 2 episodes of The Office that you wanted to watch on your TV.
Oh, man.
That you acquired legally, of course.
One of my favorite things you could do with the old Xbox is you could take your CDs, your audio CDs, put them on the Xbox, and then when you played Grand Theft Auto, it's your own radio station.
Yeah.
And I thought that was amazing. That feature is something that I will always remember and love about that like era of gaming.
There weren't very many games that took advantage of it. And I would say like today, it obviously didn't catch on really. There aren't any games doing that today, but it was neat. And I do kind of miss it. I
kind of miss it too. So anyway, I'll get to this, what we did, but we both took Xbox. Mine was a 1.0 board. What was yours?
Mine was also, the one that I had done was 1.0. My first one that I did the soft mod on back in high school was a 1.4.
Ooh.
I still have it. It's on the shelf.
That's awesome. Well, yeah, and now mine's on my shelf. You can't see it because I zoomed in like a professional camera person over there. But it's pretty sweet. I'm really happy with it. And I've actually been playing it. Like I've been using it a lot, which is great. So I'm having a good time. But it's kind of what prompted this whole thing. And then since then, I have bought 2 more broken Xboxes from someone on Facebook Marketplace that were both red ringed. And I'm putting that in air quotes for the people here, because turns out it was the cable that was busted. That they
was it the video cable or the power cable?
Power cable was what red ringed it. So I used my cable, which I knew was good, my AV cable. Both worked. Disk drives were just stuck. Replaced the rubber bands. Now they're fixed. So, and I'm giving them to friends because I'm like, I know you'll use it. You know what I mean? Like you should.
Yeah.
I'll give it to people that I know they'll use it, because then I'm like, okay, it's staying alive that way.
You should soft mod them for them or do a TSOP mod or something.
Well, I'm not modding them because I told them how much fun I had modding, and
they want to do it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I'm going to send them the video. Shout out to Macho Nacho on YouTube, the goat. of mod, if you will. But I'm just waiting for one more part for one of them. Before I gave the other one away yesterday, and then today I'm gonna give this one away to my other friend once I get the disc cover, because I ordered a disc cover that says Xbox on it for the drive, the disc cover, and that'll come into eBay this week, and then I'll just slap it on there, and then they'll be good to go. But yeah, nice. I'm also fixing consoles now too for fun. Like I have an N64 that I'm gonna fix. I've been getting really into right to repair stuff.
Yeah.
And I feel like this is baby's first right to repair is like these older retro consoles that are a little bit more easy to fix. Like I broke the Xbox I modded. You remember, you were there. I broke the DVD drive and then I fixed it on my own. Like this is cool that you could do that. So that's why it's important to me. And that's why I wanted to talk about it. So Tyler's got a lot of history behind it. I'm new. Let's do these questions. Does that work for you?
Sure.
All right. So what are the main reasons people modify their video game consoles?
Well, my light just turned off. Battery must have died. Oh well.
That's okay. I mean, I like to think that that's big video game listening in and getting upset with us. They're like, they're finally going to admit it.
That's right. If you're listening to the audio only podcast, you didn't see that, and it doesn't make any sense to you. The main reasons people modify their video game consoles, I'd say there are kind of like three big reasons. The first one, and I suppose most legit in terms of like the law, is homebrew, I think, both for just like independent video games, especially on older consoles. Back in the day, you would modify them so that like the original Xbox had a cool indie game development scene that was not indie in the way that we think about it today, where it's like an independent developer releases their game legitimately on a console. It was like, no, these indie games were not legitimately released. You downloaded them for free. And you needed a modified Xbox to run them because they were not officially sanctioned games. So homebrew for that, indie games. And then for emulation, I think, especially being able to get those emulators up on your TV and I'm thinking like 20 years ago, the prime Xbox modding period was like being able to emulate Nintendo 64 games and play those on your TV was very cool, and is not as cool today because it's very easy to do now. But back then it was extremely cool to be able to just like pack your Xbox over to your friend's house and say, I have every single Nintendo 64 game on here. Let's do some Mario Party. Was pretty cool.
I think it's still pretty cool, to be honest. Yeah. I think playing these on the consoles themselves are really cool.
Yeah. So homebrew is number one. I think this a secondary thing that is slightly less legit, but you would have a hard time, I think, convincing somebody that this should be not legal, is region restrictions on games. It's less of a thing now where like most consoles, I think these days are worldwide. Like you can buy a game from anywhere and it'll play on there. For a while, for older video game consoles, there were actual physical differences between the consoles because the TVs in like PAL regions were different from NTSC, and so they region locked those consoles because like the games straight up weren't compatible, because 50 hertz TVs, 60 hertz TVs, like that stuff mattered a lot more in the 80s and 90s for how games were made. But that sort of persisted even beyond those days. I think being able to play like and it's specifically in the US. I think there are a lot of people who wanted to play games from like Japan, right? And the TV systems in Japan and the US are compatible. They're both NTSC. But they would artificially restrict you from being able to play Japanese games on your US console and vice versa. Some of that could be legitimized by saying, well, games sell for different prices in different regions. So if you're buying them in the cheap region and playing them where they're more expensive, that's bad. I don't know. But anyway, modifying your console to get around region restrictions was a big deal. And I think extremely legitimate. One of the side effects of getting rid of region restrictions, and the third reason I think people modify their consoles, is for piracy, because once you've gotten rid of region restrictions, it's not that hard to get rid of copy protection on things and just bypass it. So piracy is a big one. Obviously, we don't condone piracy. Only play games that you legally have acquired.
Copies only.
Right. So, but that's a big reason why somebody would modify their console. And maybe the most popular, especially among people who are not really tinkerers, they're just like, I just want free games for my console. And, I get it. I've always wanted free games too.
Yeah. I mean, also, I feel like I guess we're gonna. This is kind of already going off the deep end as far as like getting into this, but for me, I feel like modding and being able to play games that are like pirated or like emulated or whatever, it's video game preservation too in a way.
That's a good point. That's like a fourth point that we should put on there, like why it's still relevant to today is like,
yeah, because some of these games were not printed. There weren't a lot of copies printed of them, but in order for them to still be accessible to people, they should have these digital versions, is what I would argue, because otherwise they're not accessible. Like some games, like, I mean, I collect N64 games. I talked about it before in this podcast. Some of them are ridiculously expensive. Like, like why would this game from 20 years ago, actually now almost 25 years ago, be this expensive realistically? Like, why? So I think in that sense, for me, it's more of a preservation thing too, to be like, you know, someone should be able to play Sneak King. Okay. Although there's so many copies of Sneak King out there. You can get Sneak King easy. Don't even worry about it.
Sneak King's easy. And they were only $5 when it was brand new too.
Yeah, they're giving it away pretty much. So
yeah, that was cool. And then I guess the fifth reason, and probably my favorite reason, is I don't know, it's fun, man. I like opening up a console and like doing stuff like soldering things, and then now the console is way better. That's cool.
I'm gonna say this. Fifth reason, education.
There you go.
Taught me to solder.
Yep.
This taught me
learning how game consoles work.
How game consoles work. I broke it actually twice. I broke my Xbox first by breaking the DVD drive pin, which I fixed, which involved me soldering. But the first time I broke it was on the back of the board. There's another D0 junction that you can use, and Tyler was on there with me, and it said in the guide, be careful because you can pull up the solder mask and pull up the trace, and that's exactly what I did. And I actually rerouted it with a wire myself, like jumped it, and it taught me. And that's something you would do to fix that problem. And
you learned how to fix a trace.
I fixed it essentially so it would boot. And so
I've never done that before. I've never fixed a trace before. So
I think the educational value. Thank you. That's what I was looking for, was a compliment. The educational value of this is a lot more to do with it for me than I think even the fact that it's like just cool. It's like you're learning to do something. And it's like there was an electronics class at the high school when I was like a paraeducator there, and I was a part of it in the last like months I was there. And it was really fun because the students would actually get into it, because you're learning how to do things that you can actually use in real life. You know, the constant school time complaining is like, when am I going to use like knowing about Pride and Prejudice in my real life, you know, or whatever. But I'd be like, it's reading comprehension, but that's a whole different thing. But like,
we can answer those questions, but
exactly. But when you're physically soldering something and like changing something and seeing how it works, I think there's like a cool factor to that. That's also important when you're learning to do something, and you can fix things, you know, you can just take something apart and fix it. And that's cool. So
I had an Xbox that would not boot. Like when you press the power, it was a 360 actually. When you press the power button, the power brick itself, which has its own like yellow, green, red lights on it, it would power up for like a half second, and then it would give you a red light on the power brick, which was very interesting. And the power brick was not the problem, because it would boot up any other Xbox that I had. So the power brick was not the problem. It was there were some bad capacitors on this Xbox 360, and I replaced them all, and then it worked. Yeah.
Also removing the clock capacitor from the Xbox, something else we did.
If you have an original Xbox and you have not removed the clock capacitor from it, you need to, because it is a ticking time bomb.
Yes, an actual ticking time bomb.
That's right.
Breaking your console. So not to put the fear in anybody on this podcast, but
there's a good reason to open literally any original Xbox.
It's time to break that sticker. Okay, just the warranty's not valid anymore. Bill Gates isn't going to give you money. Just break the sticker.
Every time you break the sticker, Bill Gates just like he just gets a little shocked.
He feels it. He feels it.
It's like, I wish we would have used better clock capacitors.
I wish we would have done that, because that was actually in an age. That's like a history behind this too, where it was in an age where clock capacitors they used were not as good, so they just had faulty ones. Because the 1.6 one that I took apart and that I'm waiting on the plate for actually has a good capacitor, according to the internet. Like, this is one of the
and you don't have to switch it out?
You don't have to swap it out. You can just leave it in there, and it wasn't leaking, and it was totally fine. And I was like, all right, good. So I'll just leave that in there. And I'm still going to tell the person I'm giving it to about it, like, hey, if something happens with this thing and it doesn't work anymore, the first thing you should check is the clock capacitor.
Yeah.
But
there were a couple of eras I want to say like the late 80s, early 90s, and then like the late 90s, early 2000s, which had what is known as capacitor plagues, where there was like some place that all of these electronics companies got their capacitors from was like cutting corners, I guess. And I'm sure somebody else can tell the story better. But anyway, lots of electronics from those eras, like a lot of old Macintoshes from the late 80s, early 90s, they need to be recapped. You got to replace all the capacitors. And then there's a similar issue in like the late 90s, early 2000s as well. Like a lot of stuff from that era also needs to be recapped, which is probably why I had to, well, I guess the 360 was beyond that time period that I had. But there is there are some 360s if they have these specific capacitors that are like, yeah, those are probably bad.
Yeah. Other common problem in the Xbox also was the one I dealt with the first one, which is the solder joint breaks where you plug the cable in the back. That's why mine was, because I told Tyler, I'm like, I'm going to buy a broken Xbox and I'm going to fix it and then mod it. And the fix was actually like really simple. I ordered a power supply, canceled the order after I fixed it.
Yeah, because all you had to do is they like the solder they used, like it, you know, or something was there. Yeah, it's common with that like time period of like the, you know, if you jiggle the cable too much, you break it, and but you can fix it pretty easily.
And that's what I did. So it's working now. So yeah, I mean, it's funny. We sat here. It's now been 17 minutes of recording time, and we've done one question. So I think we're going to be fine, Tyler. I think we're going to be all right.
Again, I could talk about this for.
I could too. I mean, I'm super into it now, and it's like most of what my YouTube algorithm is watching people fix consoles or talk about like making their own things with Arduinos or Raspberry Pis. Like that's what it's become.
Yeah.
So there's a really cool tinkering movement going on, I guess, on the internet, and it's been going on for a while. But like people making their own things, it's pretty neat.
Yeah.
So
I think that
do this.
That era of game consoles, specifically like the Xbox, GameCube, and PS2 era, is kind of the most interesting for me in terms of modding, especially the Xbox, because it was basically a PC and it had a hard drive and like it could do all kinds of cool stuff. But it was an era where the consoles were very capable of doing cool stuff. Like, I don't know what kind of homebrew you would do on a Nintendo 64 that wasn't just like a game that somebody made, you know, or for piracy. But there were lots of like cool things you could do with that generation. And then the following generation would be like the 360 PS3 era, which you can also do some modifications on. And then those are worth doing and fun. But I don't know, it just was like, it was less cool because if you really wanted an emulation machine, you could, by that point, you could just have bought like a small PC and hooked it up to your TV or something like that. And they were a little bit harder to do, and they would push out updates that would stop things from working too. So you were kind of playing cat and mouse with Sony and Microsoft. And then the following generation, like the Xbox One, still hasn't been hacked, right?
Yeah,
and the PS4 has had some stuff, but it's constantly being patched. And I guess like the Switch has a kind of a cool homebrew scene. But anyway, I don't know, that early 2000s consoles are like, that's the sweet spot for modding, I think.
I guess the newest thing, like the newest piece of hardware that's really good for modding is like a 2DS or a 3DS, right? Mm-hmm. There's a lot of things you can do with a 2DS and 3DS.
Yeah, you can do software mods for those that don't require any kind of soldering or opening it up or anything like that. And depending on which model Switch you have, there are some easier things. I did also love the modding scene for the original PSP. That was one that I kind of got into as well.
Yeah, you told me about that because that was like kind of big for the PSP. There was a lot of people doing that.
Yeah, and that was cool because the homebrew and emulators and all that stuff then became portable, right? So you could have your Super Nintendo games, or it even would do some Nintendo 64 games, and you could take them with you. And that was like, because there was nothing that could do that, you know?
I guess you could say in a way, the Steam Deck is supporting this more as a console. And all these portable PCs that are coming out now, it's like, no, we want you to. We don't, not necessarily we want you to, but we let you, and we give you open access to changing things.
Yeah,
like you can boot Windows from a Steam Deck if you want to, or you can. There's a way to work around it, I think, where you can put Game Pass on it now too, I guess.
Yeah, you can just use the browser to like stream Game Pass games from like, you know, xCloud, or if you just install Windows on your Steam Deck, then you can do Game Pass like normal. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, they definitely have taken a like, this is just a PC. We've done a lot of work to make the handheld experience really cool, and they kind of hope that you use that because then it means you're buying your games from Steam. But they put zero roadblocks in front of you to doing whatever you want with it. Like it's just 2 mouse clicks away, and it's a PC with a mouse and keyboard and a desktop. You know?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I can take my Steam Deck and plug it into like the docking station I use for work and just and put emulators on it and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's pretty great.
Yeah, they don't try to stop you. They don't even, it's not supported. Obviously, they're not going to like help you, but they also stop you.
But if you want to go on the internet, you can find anything.
Oh, yeah.
About it. Yeah. So.
Yeah. And they're not like constantly pushing out updates that like make it so you can't do that anymore. You know?
Yeah, like certain other companies do. Do you want to move on to this next question? We could,
sure.
Or we could just keep talking about whatever we talk about, but this is nice. Okay. So, how has the homebrew community contributed to gaming culture? And you wrote something here that I've never heard of.
Yeah. So I just made sure to write a note. This is tangentially related to modding video game consoles, but I think extremely relevant is the jailbreaking scene for the original iPhone. Which I know you had an original iPhone. Did you ever get involved in the jailbreaking scene for that?
I didn't, but I have it still.
Yeah, it was cool because remember when the original iPhone came out, there were no apps. That was not a thing. They were like apps. You mean websites? You could just go on the internet and whatever you need to do is on the internet.
Yeah, just go on Safari.
Yeah, so there were no apps. They did not allow you to put apps on there. There was no software development kit for the original iPhone. For you kids out there, the first iPhone was terrible. It was a bad phone, like compared to the other phones around it. It was very cool in the touchscreen was innovative. The going all in on just being a touchscreen was like a big swing that could have been a bad move, and a lot of people said it was. But anyway, the first iPhone was not great. But what you could do shortly after it came out was the hackers figured out how to jailbreak it, and then basically write their own programs for it. And one of the programs was called Cydia, still is. I think you could, if you have a jailbroken iPhone, you can still use Cydia. And there was another one before it. Gosh, I wish I could remember what it was called. There was another program before Cydia that kind of did the same thing. But what it did was it basically gave you a centralized location for finding applications for your iPhone, which obviously evolved into the App Store. And now, Apple took direct inspiration from that. I would say they took direct inspiration from that. And every game console now, of course, has also done that because you can go on there and you can buy applications and games and stuff for any console now. But without Cydia, or God, I wish I could remember what the one before it was called. It was it was not Cydia. But if without that, I think that we might be in a different world now when it comes to, because before that, getting applications for your phone was like plug your phone into your computer or plug your PDA into your computer and you download the applications from there. And you would buy them, and like buying a game like that EverQuest Pocket PC game that we talked about a couple weeks ago. That was like $20. I bought it at the store, and brought it home and like put the disc in my computer, and then it was like, okay, plug in your Pocket PC. And like,
so funny.
Yeah. And like nowadays, that's why would you need a PC to install an application on your phone? That's so stupid, right?
We were talking about, we mentioned it because I was like, I need to get a CD burner because there's a way you can make a boot disk for an Xbox to just put all the homebrew software on it for you. And I don't have that. And I'm like, I might have to buy a CD burner for the first time in like 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah. Worth it to keep one of those around.
Yeah. Actually, honestly, and now it's 20 years because when I built my PC with like a CD burner in it, it was like 2004. So that's when it was. Oh,
the USB one's not that expensive these days.
No, they're like $20. My mom actually bought one and just going to give me hers because I told her I need it for this tinkering purposes. But yeah. So Cydia. So that's like I did when I lived in Los Angeles, and I was working a job that I now look at. It was fine. It was just very boring. I spent a lot of time on my phone. And I did spoof Pokemon Go using one of those pirated app stores. And then while I was using it one day, it was like, you have a login request from Beijing. And it was like my Apple account. And I was like, deny. Like, I was like, get all of it off my phone.
Yeah.
But hey, 2-factor authentication, everybody. Put it on there.
Yes.
That's what it's important.
2-factor everything.
2-factor everything. Okay, this is
especially your email. If somebody gets access to your email, they can reset any password to anything that they want. of yours. So
at least 2-factor email.
Yeah.
All right.
But yeah, anyway, that's one of the biggest things I think has contributed to like to say this happened in the homebrew community, and I know we're fudging it a little bit by saying the iPhone jailbreak community, but they're tangentially related. Directly led to, I think, the App Store, and now that's just like the standard of how things are done. And I know you can make the argument that like, Linux has had this forever because they had apt-get forever and Yum, and like there were lots of different package managers that would like go out to the internet repositories and download things in like a sort of proto App Store, even in the like the early 2000s. So don't at me. I understand that like this didn't evolve in a vacuum, but I think Cydia really made it like, this is the only way to get applications on a phone now. Like I don't want to do it any other way.
This is when the shorts I make for the podcast for YouTube will like only make the first part of it and not have that second part in. And then someone will be like, what about
apt-get has been around for 30 years.
You guys don't know anything. Okay. That's always a fun one. So what are some, this is actually pretty good. So what are some of the most popular mods for consoles, both past and present? This is a good question because there's a lot of things we could talk about here. I mean, obviously, just like mod chips. Like I'm assuming that Xbox you did in 2006 was a mod chip, or no, it was soft mod.
I soft modded it. Yeah, I didn't do a hardware mod until only 5 or 6 years ago. Probably was my first hard mod.
People that don't know, do you want to explain what a soft mod is really fast?
Yeah, so there's the difference between hardware mod and a soft mod, and I'll do it just specifically for the original Xbox, but you can kind of extrapolate this for other things. Generally speaking, a hardware mod kind of circumvents, at least in the original Xbox's case, it circumvents the BIOS, because the original Xbox is really just a PC with some fancy things on it and a different operating system. So it has a BIOS like a regular PC does, that is set to only run Microsoft like approved programs, Microsoft signed programs. And what a mod chip would do is usurp this BIOS and use a modified BIOS that doesn't care if you're running Microsoft code. It will just run whatever you want. And a lot of hardware mods work the same way, where they will circumvent whatever functions are in place to make sure that you're only running like approved applications, and just let you do whatever you want. So that's what a hardware mod does, and that makes it easy. Makes it for an Xbox. There were a lot of other stuff you could do, like you could add little LCD screens that would like have the your temperature of your Xbox, and like you could change the lighting, and I don't know, there's other stuff you could do with it. But what a software mod does, and it is that it usually will use some sort of exploit in either a game or some other program that is already running, like a legitimate running program on this unmodified Xbox. And it will use some kind of software vulnerability to inject itself in there, and then kind of do the same thing that a hardware mod does, where it'll basically make it so that you can run whatever programs you want. Unsigned code is like the term of art for that, I suppose. Unsigned code. Splinter Cell. Yeah, there were 3 games on the original Xbox that had at least 3. I'm sure there were more that had these types of vulnerabilities. Splinter Cell is one of them. You loaded up like a hacked save file that would just sort of like do all the things for you. There was Mech Assault, I think, also, and 007 Agent Under Fire. Splinter Cell is the most
game.
Yeah. Splinter Cell was the most popular because it didn't matter which version of the game you had. Like you could have the Platinum Hits version, or you could have the regular version. Like Mech Assault was like, you can use this, but not if it's the Platinum Hits version of, because they had like patched it on like reprintings of that game, and I think Agent Under Fire also. Nowadays on the Xbox, there is a exploit known as Endgame that does not require any game at all. In fact, it will run. I can't remember the exact specifics, but basically, you like when you go to look at the save file in the like save file viewer that's built into the Xbox, that's where the vulnerability happens, and then it can do it without a game at all, which is pretty neat, and means you don't have to spend any money at all, except to get a memory unit. But you could also just borrow a memory unit from a friend who has one and use theirs, and then just give it back, because you don't need it forever. You just need it to run the thing once.
Do that thing one time. Yeah. I bought a copy of Splinter Cell thinking I was gonna do soft mod, and I led you astray on that one. I was like, you know what? I kind of just want a copy of Splinter Cell anyway.
It's a great game.
It's a good game. It's a good game. And it came with a manual. I'm like really been geeking out about game manuals lately. Like I might, for when we do Baldur's Gate 1, the CRPG, I have a bid right now. Actually, I don't want to say what it is on.
No, don't jinx it.
I don't want to jinx it. But I also like this podcast will come up before the bid ends, and someone might try to outbid me. I don't want that to happen. You know what I mean? But I'm trying to get something for it because I'm excited about it. But yeah, so the other thing you could do, like I think of a hardware mod also, and this is kind of unique mostly to like Game Boy stuff, is there's a lot of like USB-C charging that's been changed with modifications for that, especially for portable devices, making them USB-C. There's also like Game Boys might be the most moddable, right? Because you got like screen changes, you got button changes, you got charging changes. Like there's so much you can do with a Game Boy, like an older Game Boy. I have an old jet black like Game Boy. I think it's called the Blackjack Game Boy is what it's called, like the black case, but it's the big one. I'm not going to mod it because I think that it's kind of rarer, so I don't really want to mod it. But I might change this. Like I'm not going to change the shell, but I might change the screen in it to be backlit because oh boy, not having a backlit screen is pretty horrendous.
Yeah. If you can get like an IPS screen, that's one of the those are the best mods for like older consoles that like I don't care about running homebrew on my Game Boy, obviously, but like getting a backlit screen sounds nice. Maybe USB rechargeable, like you said. That sounds kind of nice, right?
And this is something that we kind of, I mean, this is kind of again on the borders of what we're talking about, but people that have made controller mods that they sell online, like Retro Fighters is a company that makes a lot of, like, I've talked about the Brawler 64 controller I use for N64, and it is making the console just way greater. I mean, there's no other way to put it. It makes it way more accessible.
Yeah, I have the Bluetooth one of those, and I use it to play emulated N64 games. Play through all of Paper Mario with that thing. It was awesome.
I mean, I got the Hunter one for the Xbox. It's wireless that you told me about. That's great. So, I mean, there's people that also, and these are just things you can buy. These are not, as far as I know, illegal because you own the console, and they're just like a new thing that people offer, and you should.
Bad Cat's been making third-party controllers for decades.
Party. It's just third party, exactly. But there's people that have figured it out to make it better for you. So that kind of hardware thing is good too.
Yeah.
All right. We've gone 32 minutes and we've only done 3 questions. Okay. Actually, we just did we actually accidentally did the 4th question with what do hardware mods differ from software mods? So what are the risks and benefits of modding a console? I think we've talked about the benefits pretty much at length in the first question, but the risk is obviously you broke it. But
you could lift the pad and have to fix a trace.
But the good news is you can fix it. Like I just said, you can fix it. And I think like I was frustrated when I broke the trace, but in the back of my mind, I just thought the entire point of this is that it's a learning experience and I need to like learn how to do this. And I fixed it. I had to order some new wire and the wire I was already using was way too big. And I had to watch some more videos on how to like solder, but I figured it all out. And I got it working again. So the risk,
it almost always voids your warranty. So on newer consoles, if there are mods available for it, like you got to weigh that.
Don't go take apart your don't go take apart your PS5 or whatever. Obviously, just don't do that. But if you find an Xbox in a dumpster or on the side of the road, like Tyler has multiple times,
more than once,
because Tyler's found Xboxes on the side of the road more than once, and I'm jealous. And if you find them on the side of the road, take it home with you. Learn to fix it up, clean it on the inside.
If I had a nickel for every time I found an original Xbox on the side of the road, I'd have 2 nickels, which,
that's pretty good though.
It's not a lot, but it's weird that it's happened twice.
I'm still trying to find like the in the wild dream of like going to a garage sale and someone selling like a broken Xbox for $5. The problem is, and this is off topic a little bit, but that's okay. The garage sale resellers are a thing. I had a garage sale at my house and someone like there was like 5 guys at my house at 8 a.m. like making right burgers. When I like breaking burgers right when I opened, and they asked me, do you have jewelry? No. Do you have this? Do you have that? I'm like, no. And they're like, okay, thanks. And they got in their cars and drove off because they were trying to like resell everything. And it's like a serious thing. So I think the dream is kind of, unless you live in a small town, the dream of the finding the thing in the wild is a lot harder than it used to be.
And like Goodwill, they when video games come through, like they just go online. They sell that stuff online and they know what they have. And there's like kind of the fun of doing like finding stuff at like garage sales and stuff is the like, not necessarily that like, oh, I'm taking advantage of somebody who doesn't know what they have, but like I don't know, sometimes you get a little discount and you're like, oh, you want to sell me this Xbox for $5? Like, sure, an Xbox is worth more than $5, but
yeah, I mean,
fun,
also pawn shops are a good place to go because
Yeah.
pawn shops will give you a deal. So for example, I got an Xbox 360 copy with case, inbox, and manual of Space Marine 2 or Space Marine 1, excuse me, for like $15, and that game is $50 online because I paid cash.
Not bad. Not bad.
Not bad at all. But we're back. That's my Emma back voice. Was it pretty good?
Break. That was good. Yeah,
Quick little
really
break.
good.
Thank you so much. Okay. So yeah, the risk is you're just going to break it. But again, I think the reward highly outweighs the risk in this situation. I think it's very worth it because it's a learning experience. Okay. So we have some legal and ethical considerations that were given to us.
Okay. Lightning round.
Yeah. So do you think console modding should be legal? Why or why not?
No, I think you do not own the thing that you bought and paid for.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yes.
This was one of the questions.
Should be legal.
This is one of the questions I thought was pretty dumb that ChatGPT gave us, but also maybe people do have a stigma behind it. But yeah, if you bought something and it's yours and the warranty's over, you're not hurting anybody.
Yeah. Well, even if the warranty's not over, like
you own it.
You just have to know that you're voiding the warranty. I don't think Nintendo needs to help you if your mod chip install goes wrong. That's not on them.
Yeah, but don't call Nintendo about that. They're gonna make fun of you in their customer support. They will make fun of you.
That's true.
So,
yeah.
If you're like, hey, I tried to mod my Game Boy, and they're like, you mean the Game Boy from like 35 years ago? And you're like, yeah. And they're like, ooh.
They're like, that Game Boy's older than me.
That game's really, really old. You shouldn't be doing that. So yeah, you got to be careful. Okay. That was a quick one. How do companies like Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft respond to modding? And do you think their stance is justified? I mean, their stance is justified because they want to make money. But I would argue that once they sell you a product, it's not theirs anymore.
Yeah, their stance is that they don't like it because it means you're going to end up using their product in a way that they didn't intend or want you to use it. And while you should be allowed to do that, I think their stance especially in not supporting it, but also in trying to stop it, makes sense. Like if their support stuff is clogged with people who tried to do an Xbox soft mod, and Microsoft was like forced to help these people fix their soft modded Xboxes, like I think that's kind of silly. So I guess it's justified that they don't like it, but I don't care.
So should people be allowed to modify their legally owned hardware and software without restrictions? Of course.
Yes.
Obviously, of course. What are the ethical concerns regarding modding for piracy versus modding for homebrew development? I mean, yeah, modding for piracy, if we're going to really talk about it here, obviously we don't condone it. Legal copies only. But if you're buying a game from 30 years ago, that money's not going to the developers anyway. It's going to someone who owns the pawn shop, used game store, guy on Craigslist. It doesn't hurt anybody.
It's not like morally superior, I guess, because you handed just a random dude $5 for the game versus if you pirate it. Like for me, I don't really have a moral problem with, especially with older games with like piracy.
Yeah.
But it is illegal, and I don't condone doing illegal things, of course.
Yeah, if you're like pirating a brand new game off of Steam and downloading, obviously that's bad.
That's kind of
that's kind of sus. But like if you're doing this to like old games, let's be honest, if you're modding a console, like we discussed, it's gonna be GameCube era or older, most likely.
Yeah.
So
you buying a used copy of Star Fox Adventures from GameStop, Miyamoto's not seeing any of that,
No, he's not. He's not seeing.
Also, he's fine.
Yeah, he told me he loves it. He's a friend of the podcast, so it's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So, all right, that was the quick lightning round of ethical concerns. Technical and development aspects. What are the technical challenges involved in creating homebrew games? This is an interesting rabbit hole because I have watched some videos of people. There's a great YouTubers. I'm going to say I was trying to avoid to use the term YouTubers, but I'm just going to say it. People on the internet that make videos where they talk about trying to like code games the way they were done for the certain console, like SNES or NES. It is wild how difficult that is. And I think that is something that in itself should be allowed because that's history. That's like keeping up with what's going on. That's important. So the technical challenge is if you're coding a game on the SNES, you're coding something with realistically no tools and you're going line by line and making sure it's right before you run it, just like you would for like recording and like coding.
Just like how you would have done it back then. Yeah.
Yeah. Like we kind of talked about in our Wow. Why is it Commodore 64 episode? Just like that, like talking about like we're like coding in that language is like very much line by line by line. So I think it's worth it for that.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of different things. I mean, the technical challenges always depend on whatever system you're doing will have its own unique technical challenges. Like you said, the Super Nintendo, you're probably doing it in some kind of assembly language. I forget what the processor is in the Super Nintendo, but for things like especially when you get into newer consoles like the PS2 era, and even the PS1 era, N64 era, Nintendo would provided a lot of like software development support for those things, or the game companies did, would provide like software development kits, which I'm sure they did with older game systems as well. But you would be using their software to do that, and there are legal concerns around that, because if you're not a licensed developer of like on the original Xbox, if you were not a licensed developer, you should not legally have access to the XDK, which is the software development kit for the original Xbox. You should not have access to that. And you can't really write a program for the original Xbox without that, which kind of weirdly makes a lot of original Xbox homebrew kind of legally murky, because if those people had legitimate licenses to use the XDK, they probably would have made a legitimate game and not homebrew stuff. But so you have to use their software development kit. But then there are things like on the Nintendo 64, there's like a new sort of like development kit that has been made recently in like the last few years, I think, that and I'm talking about something I don't really know that much about, so somebody please feel free to correct me on this, but that's like a open source software development kit for the original N64. And so presumably using that to make programs for the N64, totally fine, because it doesn't use any proprietary Nintendo software to do so. I don't know if anything like that exists.
Codex Party. It's like Mario Party, but with Codex.
Yeah. I'm not sure if anything like that exists for the original Xbox or not. I feel like there was something called OpenXDK, but now I got to Google it.
He's Googling.
OpenXDK. I don't know if people actually use that, or if it just like existed as a free legal Xbox development kit, but I'm not sure if anybody uses it for anything. The last commit on GitHub was 9 years ago, so maybe not.
Maybe not. But I think also in the age of people will make games in the style of a console and release them on Steam. We get that a lot, like in the style of PlayStation 2 graphics, or in the style of like an older like Atari graphics, you know what I mean? So that's kind of something we see, I think, a lot more than making, say, the one cartridge I do have, and I have no idea where it's at, so I'm not going to go grab it. You'll just take my word for it. I did buy Goldfinger 64, the James Bond fan-made game.
It's like a GoldenEye mod.
And I have it. It's a cartridge all on its own, and it's funny because I bought it and I tried to play it on my 64, and I forgot how bad the draw distance is on an N64, because there's some levels where it's like I can't see anything. And I have to like go. So if you were gonna play that game today, I'd say play it on a computer. Don't play it on the N64 hardware. But I have the cart as like, okay, look at this. It's cool that I have this.
Yeah, it's neat as a novelty.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, all right. So the second one is, how have flash cartridges, jailbreaks, and custom firmware evolved over the years? I mean, we can look at like just original Xbox as a comparison, because you actually kind of mentioned it before. You used to have to use like Splinter Cell or MechAssault, and now you just use like a memory card. So there are people that are still finding exploits for these things 20 or 30 years down the road. Crazy.
And relatively recently as well with the PS2, there is zero reason to, as far as I know, there's zero reason to do like a mod chip in your PS2 anymore. And there were PS2 mod chips that were very hard to install with like 20 different wires that you had to do. There's no reason to anymore, because they have found an exploit in it might be the DVD player software that is built into the PS2. I can't remember exactly, but anyway, you can have this exploit just sit on a memory card. It's called free MC boot memory card. And if you have that memory card in your PS2 when it turns on, guess what? It's booting up modded, and there's no reason to do anything else, because the fat PS2s had native support for, if you had the network adapter, had native support for just throwing a PC hard drive in there. That's how Final Fantasy 11 worked. And it's not a stretch to just put in a normal PC hard drive, and then use homebrew software to like load your homebrew from it, or your game backups that you legally created yourself. Of course. That's right.
Always.
But there's like, so if somebody's like, I want to put a mod chip in my PS2, it's like there's zero reason. Just buy a free McBoot memory card. They're extremely cheap. You can make your own, and you can also run games off of memory card. Like the people have made memory card like a micro SD adapter that goes into a memory card that you can run your games
like an
off of the memory card slot. Yeah,
it's like an EverDrive that plugs into the memory card slot. That's pretty bad. That makes me happy because I have a PS2 also. So
you should get a free McBoot memory card for it. They're not very expensive.
Honestly, the big benefit for us with this, by the way, if you haven't noticed, is this is how, I mean, personally, I'm able to play a lot of the older games we cover is through this. You know what I mean? Like after legally obtaining copies, of course. But it's so hard to access these in a way that's playable with, because I feel like you could play it on an emulator on your computer, but the feeling's not going to be there. And that's something that I think is important about having that controller and on that TV. Like, that's what you go for. So I think that's kind of where a big plus of this is.
Yeah. Well. You say your PS2 is a slim or a fat PS2?
I don't know. I'd have to grab it. It's actually downstairs, so I'd have to go grab it. Okay. I did some reorganization and I moved some of the console stuff that was sitting on a shelf upstairs is now sitting on a shelf downstairs. So I would have to grab it and show you, but I can do that after we're done today. So, because let's get a memory card going for it. That'll be fun.
Yeah.
So, all right, cool. Now then, we are on the community and industry. This is kind of neat. So are there any examples of homebrew games that later became commercially successful? And I think the big one you just wrote right here, that's Alien Hominid.
Yeah, that was like a Flash game that was made that was then turned into a console game. So maybe not quite the same thing of like this was part of the homebrew scene, I wouldn't say, but it was definitely like an indie game that became a not indie game. And there's tons more examples.
Counter-Strike.
First one. Yeah, Counter-Strike's a good example.
Counter-Strike's a good example of that. I mean,
yeah, that came out of the PC modding scene.
Yeah, DayZ was an Arma mod before. Yep. So, I mean, if we're counting, I would consider a mod for a game homebrew. So, like, because you're taking it, and I mean, all the Doom mods that came out and everything. So, yeah, that's quite a few. But those are the big examples I can think of is Alien. I mean, I think a Flash game would count because a Flash is pretty indie.
Yeah, pretty indie thing. Yeah, I wouldn't say that this was a homebrew Xbox game that then was made into a. You know what I mean? There's no homebrew version of Alien Hominid that runs on your modified Xbox. It's just the Flash game became. But in spirit, it's like the indie game became a real game.
For sure. All right. So number 18 here, this I don't know why I said the number, but this question here, what impact do console mods have on game preservation efforts? We kind of mentioned it already, but it's important because of all the stuff that's disappearing. Like, I mean, it's the most
important way to preserve games today, I think. Like, if they were to somehow say, no, you can no longer modify your console, that would be a huge blow to game preservation.
Think about all the games that you are just going to kind of go after a while, right? Like they're just like, they're not, the cartridge is going to stop working. Things are going to break down.
Get
scratched, broken. It's just not going to work. That's where this comes in, I think, and why it's important. I don't think our retro consoles are too like at risk, because we do have a lot of people that are like taking all these games and preserving them and everything. I think, like we mentioned it before, it's like mobile games, things that are going to be like online only that disappear. Those are the ones that are the big risks.
Games that rely on servers that can be shut down is a big deal.
I mean, we talk about like Flash games too. Like a lot of Flash games got saved by that one project we talked about previously, but it's not going to be always like that, and there's still stuff that I'm sure is just gone. So that's kind of where we're at. The final question here is pretty much an obvious should console manufacturers embrace homebrew development rather than fight against it? And it's 100% yes.
And I think there's varying levels to this. Obviously there's the Valve thing, which is like, do whatever you want, we don't care. Like, it's extremely easy to pirate games on the Steam Deck because it's just PC. It's as easy as it is to pirate PC games, right? And homebrew and all that stuff. Like, they don't care. They don't fight it. I think Microsoft, whether this is a result of the homebrew modding scene or not, maybe is a question we could ask, but they did embrace independent development with the Xbox 360. If you remember those like XNA games, when they started doing downloadable games on the Xbox Arcade, there were a lot of they put out like this very cheap, relatively speaking, cheap like development kit for indie developers. I think maybe as a way to sort of circumvent this, like, hey, look, if people are looking for ways to make games for our consoles and they're not doing it because they can't afford to, how can we make it more affordable? And they did that with the XNA stuff that was like kind of earlier on in the Xbox 360 era. Nowadays, you can, I don't think you have to pay anything to develop a game for like the Xbox One or the PlayStation 4. You will have to pay to like put it up on the store, I think, but I don't think they like make you jump through any hoops just to make the game itself to start with.
I don't think so. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of tools now too are so like good about moving between different platforms, like Unity, for example, Unreal. Like those are all good at doing that for you now. That the hurdles aren't nearly as bad as they used to be.
Yeah, so for a lot of projects in, like you said, in Unity or Unreal, like it's as easy as just check the Xbox box, you know, and it's like, oh, now my game works on Xbox.
Did you click the button? Well, now it works. Good job. Yeah. So I think that's a good, also the PR move too. The PR move of it, of being like, hey, we're Microsoft, we're letting you do this. That's just makes you look good in the eyes of a lot of gamers.
And there are probably a lot of developers that got their start making games that way. And when they were successful, or even just the skills they learned, even if they weren't successful, like helped them make successful games later. And I don't think Microsoft regrets that at all, you know?
Yeah.
Lowering the barriers to making video games is always good.
Yeah, we've talked about, I mean, I've talked a little bit about how I feel about Roblox and the nature of it and what it's doing. But there are some games that we've gotten from people who started making Roblox games, like Lethal Company. That's from a person that started making Roblox games. And then we got Lethal Company out of it, which everyone loves. So I think the barrier of entry has never been lower in this case. You know, it's a lot easier to get in and to do this, which is awesome. So yeah, but that's kind of been our discussion on modding and homebrew. There's so much we didn't talk about, but
yeah, I would love to hear other people's like questions about this and like what they want to hear about. Cause like I love talking about this. I this is like one of my favorite.
We would talk about it. We've talked off air, you and I, about how if we did cover it, we would do it by console probably. So it'd be like the history of Xbox console modding, for example, which would also probably be multiple parts because Xbox console modding has a lot to it, which is nuts.
And if you are interested specifically in the Xbox, Modern Vintage Gamer is a YouTube channel. He puts out videos every week on a variety of like video game preservation topics, but he specifically was a large part of the homebrew development scene for the Xbox back in the day, and so he has a lot of videos where he goes into the history of how stuff worked and like that kind of stuff. So I'm not sure we could do a better job than him on Xbox.
No, I don't think so.
But, I mean, I do highly recommend checking his channel out.
The dream would be to have him on to talk to us about it. I think that would be the dream, if anything, is like reaching out to us about it, because I want to have people on that are experts in this field. Like I've talked about the Video Game History Preservation, or Video Game History Foundation, and their like work in like archiving everything. I would love to talk to them about stuff. But yeah, this a lot. So anyway, let's get to the big segment that everyone wants to know. What you've been playing, Tyler?
I finished God of War 2.
Nice.
And I have moved on to God of War Chains of Olympus. I'm going in release order. So this is a prequel game that takes place before the original God of War. It's when Kratos is doing his service to the gods, and they have promised to wipe his bad memories from his brain if he continues serving them.
Oh, a little memory wipe for pain. Yeah, that's nice.
But it's very impressive. It feels like a full God of War game. Like the graphics are a little bit trimmed down from the PS2 versions, but not a lot. And otherwise, it feels like a full-on God of War game. Like the combos all work the same. Everything works the same. Dodging is a little bit weird because PSP didn't have a right joystick, but it's not terrible. And it does all the cool camera stuff that the console versions do. It's a very good portable companion game to the God of War series. Highly recommend it. It's also pretty short. I'm like approaching halfway through it, and I've been playing for like 2 hours. So,
oh wow,
yeah, it's not a very long game. But I'm fine with that because I'm kind of trying to just blast through this series. So I think next I'll play God of War 3. I think I'm going to do the remastered version for PS4 because it runs better and I can get trophies that way.
Ooh, little trophies, tasty achievements. Everyone loves them.
But that's it. What have you been playing?
Well, I actually tried to pull up my Trello board on my phone and it didn't work. So now I'm going to do it here. I have beaten quite a few games this week. So I beat Ghost Recon Wildlands, which is really fun. And I have some gripes with it because if you beat all the missions, you get like an alternate ending, but the alternate ending is just not a lot. It's just not like worth the time it's spent. So, and that kind of put a bad taste in my mouth. So when I beat Indiana Jones and the Great Circle last night,
oh, nice,
which was fantastic, I didn't go back and play through all the extra stuff. I just watched the cutscene online. I was like, I'm not going to go back through and do this.
That's what I did with Arkham Knight recently. Yeah. Kelly finished playing it and we were like, do we do everything to get like the good ending? And the good ending is like 30 extra seconds where it's like, maybe Batman is right? And you're like, okay,
yeah,
that's fine.
It's not worth it. And I was like, I'm just going to watch it online, and it was fine and it was good. But the game is great. It's like an Indiana Jones movie. It's like a really good Indiana Jones movie. It does do the jumping the shark thing where it's going to somewhere and it's like surprise, and you're like, okay, like they do this thing in Indiana Jones without spoilers where they just like pull something famous from history or the Bible, and that's the big reveal. And they definitely do that in the Great Circle. So but if you've watched any Indiana Jones movie, you know that's coming, so it's fine. But I could also see a strung out Todd Howard explaining the story of this game to people at night and being amazed, So, all right. I beat that. And then I did also start playing more of the Dark Alliance 2. So I picked that up, and I can already tell you that the quality of life improvements are mind-blowing. I have chosen to play as a necromancer, and my little bone buddy, I just summon my bone buddy. He fights for me. I just collect the treasure. Oh, beautiful. Chef's kiss. So bone much fun. Buddies. So yeah, they did some changes to it. We'll talk about it more when I get to the episode, but you don't play as the same characters that you played in the first one. It does talk about them. I don't know what happened to them. I haven't gotten that far yet, but it's very different. So that's what I've been playing. But if you have any comments or things you want to talk about with us regarding modding or homebrew or what you've been playing or your thoughts on Indiana Jones or God of War, send an email to codexhistorypodcast@gmail.com or go to codexpodcast.net. All our links are there for our Discord, this contact forum, our Trello boards, everything. So you can check that out. And I think that's going to do it. I got a little surprise, a little preview. You ready? A little video preview of what we might be talking about soon in the future. Right here. And if
you're not watching the video version, we're not going to tell you.
Yeah, it's a lot bigger.
Go check it out on YouTube.
Yeah, sure. That's how we get them. That's the clickbait, right? That's what we do. I don't know if we'll talk about that next week.
Podcast hosts don't want you to know this one simple trick.
That's true. The worst modding things ever. That's what we should have called it. So I don't know what we're doing next week. If we're doing that or if we're doing more God of War, we'll figure that out. But see. With that, Tyler, would you like to say goodbye to everybody?
Sure. Goodbye, everybody.